Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial. This is a tutorial on an older project I did. It's the Apple TV title effect, where as you remove the remote, the title hovers and rotates in place, giving you a sense of 3D. This title we're going to create is for 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's essentially the sun with an Earth under it with the title 2001: A Space Odyssey. This entire project will be created in Framer with no imports or images, and this is how I did it. The video is playing at 5x the speed, and right now it's just going very fast forward into what I was doing. I've created 4 layers so far: background, the card itself, and the sun with the Earth under the sun. As you can see, the Earth has a silhouette, and it's going to have a gradient for the effect of the sun ray reflecting just on the edge of it. Right now I'm tweaking the background image. I've spent a long time doing this. This is just how I did it. There was no preparation, so this is the entire flow as I was tweaking it. Over here I was forgetting most of the syntax on how to actually create this in CSS, so as I remembered it, using basically trial and error, this is how I progressed along in the project. By the way, this process is very typical of me. I often start the project without a concrete idea of what I'm about to create, but I always figure it out along the way. Now, so far you've noticed that I have the shadow gradient horizon effect pretty much done. I'm creating a few variables to replace some of the colors I use, so that the design looks more realistic. And as you can see here, with Framer, a lot of the process of design happens within the code, so there's no sketch involved in this. Everything I'm creating is basically done here. Over here I switched to the web browser to look for the syntax or the kind of requirements for using text layers, which is a new feature for Framer. And I've been looking for the right typeface. I know it's a Futura, so I went online and found Muli to be a good replacement font, since Futura is not available as a web font, but Muli is. Over here I'm finding the right syntax for the font weight, which I've defined. So as you can see, now that I've moved the typeface into place, this is pretty much the setup for this design. I'm just tweaking a few details for the dimensions of the card itself. Next is the reflection or the glow that the card makes. Right? There's almost like a glass effect to the cards in Apple TV. So the way I created this was using a simple background, simple layer with a radial gradient applied to it. As you can see, I'm tweaking the syntax to make sure that this actually looks like a big reflection instead of just a gradient overlay. Now I'm lining to the center, so there's a faint glow to this card. Now after that, I've created another event in which I'm detecting mouse touch. So on the background layer, which is the entire project, every time the mouse hovers over the layer, there's an event that's being fired, and inside that event, we're creating a delta with two variables inside that delta. Now, basically, we're using this delta to capture x and y values. This delta is an object, and what this object does is that it gives you the x and y positions of the mouse position on screen. So you can see I'm playing with different numbers here and using the utils.modulate function to actually capture it. And then I realized I could just simply use a ratio of the delta itself. Although this appeared to work at first, what I quickly realized is that this actually doesn't work when you have more than, let's say, more than the amount allowed for the movement. Let's say you're on a very large screen and you're moving your mouse very far. That actually doesn't that doesn't limit the amount of change that can happen. So your glow can move off screen and your rotate can actually be quite drastic. That's what I realized here is that the rotation is actually quite high, and then as you notice just above I added a Z value to the card itself so that it doesn't actually cut into the surface of the B. So I'm tweaking the amount here. This is a cool thing about Framer is that you can actually tweak the interactions on the fly and really try to get the right value, the right kind of movements and changes in the code, and actually fine-tune it on the first go. So within an hour, I went from not having any code to this entire setup and actually being able to build this interaction. As you can see, I chose 300 as the range of mouse movement. So anything beyond 300 is limited by using the true value, the true Boolean value at the end of the utils.modulate function, which is a function that's very handy for this kind of stuff. As you can see later, I'll be using quite a number of these for the X and Y values of the glow. And then I've moved on to rotation, so we're tweaking the rotation of the card itself. And utils.modulate, you can read more about it on the Framer docs. So I've added increase the Z value to make it even higher so that the card shadow does not cut into the background layer. I can also change the background layer Z index to be a negative value so that actually fades further down in the vertical space. So you can see here I'm trying to tweak the glow's actual positioning. This is just trying to get perfect, and it's entirely subjective, so there's not necessarily wrong answers in how you want to position the glow or any of the values for this matter. So as you can see, I'm tweaking the rotation for the Y. Notice it's quite big, so I've decreased it. I made the shadow blur a bit higher so that it's slightly more realistic with the shadow there. And everything is constrained to the amount of movement. So when I go beyond the 300 value in mouse movement, this whatever value I'm changing, for example, the mid-X for the title here does not go all the way up to the edge. Here I'm just trying to find the right math for this equation. It turns out that you have to start at the center, which is the width of the card divided by 2, and for the Y it's the height of the card divided by 2, and you're just adding a value. So you're setting a starting value and ending value for the utils.modulate. So that corresponds to the 300, negative 300 to 300 value. So when your mouse moves, it's actually adjusting the movement to a constrained ratio of how much you moved. Next, I'm doing the same thing for the Earth, and it's actually quite straightforward so far. Here I've tried something new. I've actually tried to use a ratio to tweak the positioning for the rest of the cards based on the title's change. But I realized that actually doesn't work because the title positioning, once you put a ratio in it, it's actually not starting from the center. So that's why we have to use utils.modulate, because we want to start from the center of the card. And when you use a ratio of it, it's actually constraining it the entire range to a smaller starting point. So so that's why we have to use so many utils of modulate and can't really use a ratio. So you can see here I'm tweaking the positioning for the sun. The sun is probably the smallest change, but it's better to have some sort of a change rather than having it being still. So as you can see here, all of the elements now move on screen. And at the end, I refer to the docs again to create an event listener for resizing.